think it should have been the family, especially the boyfriend of the one who was injured.
The ultimate responsibility has to go towards the medical examiner in that county. They're the ones that are responsible for identifying that victim.
In a situation like that, you really don't want to start pointing fingers and blaming people. I mean, what's done is done. It's a tragedy, really.
If they would have identified the right person early on, we wouldn't have this discussion right now.
Those are the opinions of a few of the folks in our region when we asked them who's to blame for that deadly mix-up of identification. I know you've heard about it. It was a tragic car accident. One girl was declared dead when in fact she had been in a coma for about 5 weeks. The other girl who had been buried was not who her family thought it was. We're asking you what you would do now if you were one of those family members. If you were the one who lost your loved one, would you sue? And how about the one who thought they had buried her 5 weeks ago? What about pain and suffering for you? I'm going to put that to the attorneys on the panel here and say, is this a case that's ripe for litigation?
Well, as a plaintiff's attorney, I would say that...
That's your second time saying that.
Well, I have to tell you my perspective and make sure that people understand I do have a bias and I do have a point of view. And that is that as an attorney, I would look to see who's responsible. Again, I say it really rests primarily with the person who caused the accident. But looking to see, in this case, what the medical examiner did, even though he may have been responsible, and I believe responsibility should be assigned to him, in Indiana there is what they call sovereign immunity. And it's something that exists
in layman's terms.
I mean, you can't sue the state.
Okay.
You can't sue the county government. There are certain exceptions, but in this case, in Indiana, there's a specific statute that prevents the coroner from being sued.
Let's talk about the Sirac family. They thought 5 weeks ago they buried their daughter. They are, as everyone has reported here, I mean, overjoyed that their daughter's alive, but still bittersweet because someone did lose a child. Certainly the 5 weeks that they thought their kid had perished, there's got to be pain and suffering that's associated with that.
It'll be interesting to see what they do, too, because on May 18th, they actually began the process. They hired an attorney, and they began the process of raising an estate for a wrongful death suit against Mr. Spencer, who was driving the tractor-trailer truck. So they already have an attorney on board. The question is, now you've got a coroner who does have immunity. Where are they going to look to place blame? And as a defense attorney, I can tell you that I really just don't think that there's a place to place blame. There are different people who may have made mistakes, and in this day of CSI and watching television and thinking that it happened so easily, we may be prone to think that the coroner did something wrong.
Well, I think he did something wrong. And again, I think that even if there were structural differences to this young lady, there were changes that would have required them to do more. If they said, you know, I think this is her, or her face is bloodied and bruised and swollen, then that doesn't mean you rest on it. It means that you go beyond and find out.
Well, then what about the hospital? What responsibility, if any, did the hospital have in identifying and making sure that it had the patient it thought it had?
The hospital likely relied upon, and don't get me to defend the hospitals, that's her job, but in this case, I actually think that the hospital relied upon the information that was provided to them by the coroner and or law enforcement people in Indiana. And I think in getting the history and getting that information, they did rely upon them. We
were talking about this in the green room,
yeah,
because actually we kind of flip sides. I could see a suit against the hospital, only because in my cases there's often a responsibility to get past medical records. And if Laura, the person that they thought was Laura, it was actually Whitney, but if she had allergies, a different blood type than Whitney, that's the type of information that you would think that they would need or have. And there hasn't been any discussion in all of my research on this issue about what happened at Parkview Hospital and then when she was transferred to the rehab facility.
Mike, can you tell us anything? I know you've gotten to know the Sirac family very well. Can you tell us anything of their plans?
At this point, they've just been kind of holding back, you know, seeking their privacy at this point. And the community at this point is respecting that. Pastor Mathis in Saturday's paper had, you know, asked asked the community to give them this private time to get used to the idea of just having Whitney back.
Right.
At this point, I think the last thing on their mind is a lawsuit. I know they did bring the wrongful death lawsuit against the driver,
right.
But now obviously that has changed, and I do not think that they are even, at this point, considering anything. And I know in somewhere I read today, the Van Ryan family is also at this point not considering a lawsuit. Both families, you have to realize, Taylor University is a evangelical Christian liberal arts school, and both families have strong faith in God and Jesus, and believe in forgiving others,
right.
and that type of thing. And unless things change, I don't see either family at this point pursuing this further as far as any type of a lawsuit.
Okay,
but
that is a question that we're asking our viewers. What would you do if you were in that situation? If you want to tell us, you can still email me at cn8.tv. In fact, let's check in with our It's Your Call mailbag and see what you have to say so far about this topic. One of our viewers, Bill, who is a medical examiner himself, wrote this and has this to say: misidentification does happen, and medical examiners must be diligent in confirming the body identity. John, on the other hand, has this to say: I'm just wondering how they messed up the two girls' identity. A simple blood test would prove one's identity. And lastly, Bob has a question. I think this is a shame for both set of parents. What will they do with the girl's body who is already buried? And Doctor, it's a grim question, but I understand they are going to exhume the body that was buried as Whitney's and then rebury it as Laura.
Yes, that's what they intend to do. That's my understanding. Exhumations are something that do happen from time to time, which takes me back to the point that I'd like to make about identification. We talked earlier about the hospital's identification and the coroner's office. The coroner's office, one of their primary functions on a day-in and day-out basis is making identifications. The hospital, I mean, they have to know who their patient is, but that's not generally a problem for a hospital. Someone is usually bringing a person in. If they're not, they have identification. There may be problems, in multiple victim incidents, but their primary goal is to treat traumatic injuries early on, and you don't need to know who somebody is to do that. On the other hand, the coroner frequently has cases brought into them where we may not know, medical examiners as well, where we may not know who the person is. And it's a fundamental, basic part of the examination to make an identification and to preserve materials to confirm identifications once a body has been buried if a question's raised.
I think the protocols in Indiana are going to be looked at a little bit more closely in the future. I think that they're elected officials, I think, in Indiana, and I read somewhere that only half of them have taken and passed the certification test that's part of the state's.
Well, it is a coroner system, which is an elected position. They are not generally medically trained, whereas a medical examiner's office is trained professionals. They're physicians with specialization and training in forensic pathology. Okay. But this points out why you have to have a protocol, and whether you're a coroner or a medical examiner, it should be the same.
All right, on that note, I do have to take a quick break, but we'll have some final comments when we return. If you'd like to tell us what you think, perhaps you'd like to take our web poll at cn8.tv.
This week on It's Your Call, Tuesday night at 9, gun control. What should be done to stop the growing number of gun-related homicides? Do you still agree with the freedom to bear arms? And on Wednesday, a psychic visit. Joan Marie Whalen joins Lynn to give a few readings live on the air. If you have a comment about any of these shows, email us at cn8.tv.
Lynn Doyle's jewelry provided by David Craig Diamonds and Fine Jewelry, Newtown, Pennsylvania.
last call tonight is from Linda. Linda, good to have you with us. What do you think?
Hi. This kind of boggled my mind when I first heard it, but 8 years ago, my husband and I lost a beautiful 27-year-old son from a horrendous accident. And I think, even though he was identifiable, I think the difference is from the very beginning, my husband and I sat on each side of his bed and held his hand. And I don't know at what point the mom and dad did that to their child,
right.
But if I had held my child's hand for 2 minutes, I would have known, my heart would have told me that was not my child. So I don't know why the parents couldn't go to the bedside, but my heart goes out to her because it's a forever loss, and I'm so sorry the family lost her.
Yeah.
But something was missing with that bond between mom and child, because just holding your child's hand, you would have known.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your story, and of course our hearts and prayers go out to you as well. We've been asking tonight who's to blame for this tragic mix-up. Let's check in with our web poll and see what you think. Are you blaming the coroner or the deputy coroner, or do you say it's no one's fault? There are the numbers there. It's a non-scientific survey, but another way for you to tell us what you think. That's all the time that we have for our discussion. I do want to thank Mike Jones from the Gaylord Herald-Times out there in Michigan. Thanks so much for giving us some insight on this case. I appreciate it. Our hearts and prayers go out to both families. Here in the studio with me, Jonathan Briskin, forensic pathologist. Thank you very much for your perspective. And Rhonda Hill-Wilson, good to have you here. And of course, rounding out our panel was Heather Hansen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
I think we'll all be watching this case, and hopefully there will be more answers as time goes by. On that note, I do want to remind you to join me on Tuesday night when we talk about an important discussion on gun control. Are we doing enough to combat the growing gun violence in our country, and should we still have the right to bear arms? If you want to tell me what you think about that topic, I know that you will make my computer go crazy, but email me at cn8.tv. And before we say goodnight tonight, I do want to congratulate the staff and crew of It's Your Call for once again receiving an Emmy Award for Outstanding Talk and Discussion Program. And why this one is particularly special, Eric Gregg, who is a former National League umpire, was one of our guests on the show that won on Saturday night. Well, he passed away tonight. He had a stroke. He's only 55 years old. He was one of our favorites here on the show. So we'd like to offer our condolences to his family tonight on his passing. You too are in our thoughts and prayers. With that said, we hope you have a good night.